Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about homosexuality in Big Brother, and I'm going to do a few videos talking about the different groups in the LGBT community. So for this video, I'm going to be talking about gay men and their experiences on Big Brother and how they were archetyped or stereotyped due to what production casts them for, what production expected, and how homophobia may or may not have played a part in their journey, or how their homosexuality played a part in their journey based on how they interacted with people, how they acted, so on and so forth. So I'm going to do this with homosexual women, then bisexual men, bisexual women, so on and so forth, as long as the content is there. And I'm only going to focus on Big Brother USA for this video. I did make a compilation a few years ago about homophobia in Big Brother US. I will link that above. Hopefully, you all checked that out. But I'm not going to format this in that way. I'm just going to be talking about what I observed, and if I can put some clips in from the actual show, I will. But if not, then you already know. I've made videos like this discussing race and ethnicity in Big Brother USA and Canada, breaking it down by each of those groups. So this is pretty much in a similar vein to that. I'm going to do this by talking about the house guests chronologically. I also want to add some additional commentary where with this video I'm only talking about the people who either identified as or have later come out as homosexual or gay, since sexuality isn't easily visible like race or even ethnicity is. So while I personally do think there are some more people who fit in the LGBT community that haven't come out yet, it is not my place to out them, and constant speculation really isn't good, and it can lead to a very deep hole that's really not worth getting into. So for this video, I'm only talking about people who identify as a part of the LGBT community, whether they were out on the show or came out after the show. Since sometimes people who were closeted but later came out, you can see how that affected their experience in Big Brother. So now that I got that clear, let's just get to it. So the first gay man to be in Big Brother, or at least in the version of Big Brother we know now, is Bunky from Big Brother 2. Honestly, I don't even think there was a gay man on Big Brother 1, but even if there was, I'm not talking about Big Brother 1, and I generally don't talk about it on my channel. So, anyways, he entered the house hiding his sexuality, since gay men were still not portrayed much on reality TV, and felt the need to be closeted at first for the experience. The entire house speculated about who was quote unquote the gay one, and he had a huge coming out moment to the house guests. There were supportive people like Monica and Adam from what we saw on the episodes, but there's definitely some tension between himself and Kent, because Kent told Bunky how he felt about homosexuals, though Bunky was not out yet at this point in time. The friendship between Bunky and Kent was a huge storyline on the season, where they got over the homophobia and homosexuality to realize that they are both normal people and they have a lot in common. They both relied on one another throughout the game, since they were older than a lot of the house guests, and they were not as fame whorish as the others, and their progression was great as they defended one another and became lifelong friends before Kent's passing, though Kent's thoughts on homosexuality did not change. What's interesting about Bunky and his journey throughout the season that I just realized is that when he started losing weight and getting more muscular, and while this was happening, he started being seen as more masculine as he stopped crying and started defending himself a lot more. So during this process, Bunky made some retorts that could suggest some internalized homophobia, or at least in my eyes. He mentioned Hardy's more feminine qualities as him being a quote unquote closet case, like Hardy caring a lot about his appearance, and I remember they had a conversation where Bunky pretty much said that Hardy ranks his gaydar, or at least a little bit, and he ended up accusing Hardy of not being straight several times, and he would use this as an insult, which was just kind of cringe to me. I do remember Will kind of making some homophobic comments towards Bunky, though he would make it seem like it was a joke, though that was just something that happened a lot during the season in general. In general, his journey on the season is very similar to Rudy from Survivor Borneo, which happened a year before this. So you can definitely see the trends of society throughout reality TV, depending on how or when they took place. So you saw a lot of similar content like this on the early 2000s reality TV shows. So the next gay male contestant on Big Brother USA is Marcellas from Big Brother 3 and Big Brother 7. So he's the second gay man to be in the Big Brother USA house, and he's the first black gay man to be in the Big Brother house. So his experience is obviously going to be different than Bunky's. What isn't really discussed much when it comes to people who fit more than one identity is intersectionality and how it makes people who fit a certain sexuality have completely different experiences based on their other identities. And one of these other identities involves race. Marcellas is also someone who was very open about how he was engaged to a woman and how he had a huge coming out moment where he had to tell his fiancée and his religious parents, which caused the people in the house to open up to him since he was so closed off, and that definitely built a target on him regarding him being so closed off and trying to dim himself down. In the beginning of the season, Marcellus was isolated, though that might have been due to him not fully showing himself, but he was quickly targeted, and there was discussion as to whether his sexuality and race had to do with it, especially from Jerry. Though we definitely had commentary from the other house guests where they kind of knew that he was the gay one, quote unquote, in the house this season. It was noticeable to me that in both of his seasons, he mainly aligned with women and was closest to the women. He was close to Amy from the very beginning, no matter how turbulent that would become at times in the season. He did get close to Danielle, especially during the week where Amy was not there on his first season, and he was close to Lisa, which is why he was so angry that she nominated him on the first week, but they got closer after she was ditched by her alliance in Big Brother 3. And then on All Stars, he really didn't have any allegiances with the guys whatsoever. He was close to Erica and Diane throughout the season, and he was the closest to Janelle, though that was a repeat of his relationship with Amy, and he even got close to Danielle again, despite them being at odds entering the season. It seemed like he struggled to get along with many other men throughout his seasons, which we mainly saw with his interactions with Josh, Howie, and even Chilton, where he has hostile relationships with them, though he had good enough relationships with people like Roddy, Jason, Kesar, and somewhat James. So I guess it's just the type of man and the vibes that they give him, or they're a bit more accepting in comparison. He is one of the two gay men who are ever able to return to Big Brother. Pin this point for now since it will become important once I discuss someone else, and to be a part of the bigger CBS family overall, as he was a part of the house calls in between his two seasons. As we go through the list, there's definitely a discussion about how gay Big Brother house guests do not get the chance to return or expand their reality TV careers, especially compared to their straight counterparts. But myself was one of the few in a very long time, or the only one in a very long time, that was able to break this. And the second case, at least regarding Big Brother, was due to circumstances rather than want, but we'll get to that once we discuss that person. You could say that CBS used him as the quote-unquote token gay person, but he also made the most out of it and was able to branch out into what he is doing currently. So the next person chronologically is Will from Big Brother 5. So they skip a season since Big Brother 4 was about exes, and I guess having gay people who are in a romantic relationship on a reality show like Big Brother was too progressive in 2003, so Will is the next gay man to be on Big Brother. Even at this point in the mid 2000s, there was still a quote unquote coming out moment that he had to deal with since he was debating about whether to tell people or not. I remember there was a conversation between himself and Mike, and because he is a liberal gay man and Mike is a conservative straight man, it was expected for them to not get along, but they really did bond with one another, and they had a lot of intellectual conversations. He had a breakdown during the second week Have Not competition, as it was a build up from him screwing up the challenge and not being seen as masculine compared to the other house guests, as well as getting tired of the homophobic jokes that Jace and Scott would use that were directed towards his way, as they were only speak to him, or they would only speak to him regarding his gayness. He is another person who ended up bonding with most of the women in his season and couldn't really connect with most other men in the house, though I think Marvin and arguably Drew were the only ones that he got along with throughout the season in a consistent manner. Of course, there was his final week in the season where he was nominated against Marvin, where his supposed allies in the twins did not tell him ahead of time that he was getting nominated, and used the Bible to justify being nominated. Of course, this was a horrible look, since Adria nominated the gay person and the black person to be nominated, and it came off like Adria used the Bible to discriminate. He did not handle this well at all, and while he was close to staying, he did not want to have to kiss up to the twins, and Adria evicted him. He said in his interview with Julie that Adria and Natalie are worse than Scott and Jace due to how they treated him in the last week. And what I found pretty interesting is that on the season, he was, I wouldn't say scrawny, but he was very skinny, and you could somewhat say he was twinkish. But in the years following this, he became very muscular and very buff, so I'm wondering if he made the change to become more masculine, or if his experience with Big Brother and not being seen as masculine enough, especially regarding his relationships with the muscular Scott and Jace, might have potentially played a part in his future developments. Next on the list is Beau from Big Brother 6. There really isn't much to talk about with Beau compared to all of his predecessors, since Beau in general just did not get much coverage whatsoever on the episodes. Let's talk about that, where the past three got a lot of character, narration, and moments on the episodes, but Beau never got that chance, and you really have to think why that was the case. While he kind of fit into the quote-unquote stereotypical gay man archetype, he was a lot calmer and chill than others who fit this unfortunate archetype. Not just in reality TV in general, but with television overall and even film, archetypes and stereotypes are used as an easy way of marketing and storytelling. So when someone does not fulfill that archetype and doesn't do anything to subvert it, especially in reality TV, they tend to wither. Beau unfortunately did not fit this, and it was why his presence was limited on the show. But I was able to get some commentary about him. He bonded mainly with women on the season, as he was the only man in the Friendship Alliance, and because he's gay, some people didn't even consider him a man, or they consider him as quote-unquote one of the girls, which is another trope throughout media with gay men, and we see that quite a bit on Big Brother. There was the fight with Janelle, where she made fun of him for being an escort to older men, but I don't think that's specific to his sexuality. But he did act in a relatively stereotypical way during that moment, and it does kind of show some of the negative sides regarding the relationship that gay men have with women, meaning straight women. Though it's ironic because he and Janelle are now friends and have been friends every year since this season. So, yeah. Here is an extra tidbit. I didn't learn this until I saw something on Twitter a few months ago, where apparently Marcellas and Beau had long-lasting beef over the last 2 decades because Marcellas felt jealous of Beau because they're both black and gay, and Marcellas felt like because Beau was more recent that he would take Marcellas' spot or whatever, but they resolved it recently, and I just found that tidbit to be pretty interesting. So the next person chronologically is Joe from Big Brother 8. By this point in time, there was really no need to have a huge quote-unquote coming out moment on the show, or a coming out moment at all, since homosexuality on reality TV has been a lot more normalized by the time of the late 2000s. And there is no speculation about who was the gay person that we saw on a lot of the earlier seasons. Joe joined the cast unknowingly due to his relationship with his ex-boyfriend Dustin as a part of the Exes twist, and this is the first time two non-straight men have ever been on Big Brother together, much less have a romantic involvement with one another. So this was huge just from that alone. Once this happens, we see Joe completely lose his mind when Dustin enters the house, and it causes for a volatile fight, mainly from Joe, where he states that Dustin gave him gonorrhea. It's really a shame that their dynamic did not last longer in the season, since we saw Joe, a gay man who dated Dustin, a bisexual man, And that dynamic has not been explored before this season or since this season. I don't even think that dynamic's explored in general on reality TV. Honestly, I don't even think it's explored much on media overall, and this was a really missed opportunity for that to be developed and shown and bring a bit good discussion to it here, since I'm pretty sure that played a part in the relationship in many ways. Ultimately, Joe felt like his strategy completely went out the window when Dustin appeared, and the messiness caused him to play personally. We saw Joe be extremely messy in situations that did not involve him whatsoever, and they kind of painted him as the quote unquote stereotypically dramatic, flamboyant, sassy, and manipulative gay man, which definitely played a part in him going home second. So the next person on this list, based on chronological appearance, is Parker from Big Brother 9. He is the first of quite a few people on the list of LGBT huskies that did not have the quote-unquote appearance or the quote-unquote identification of being a part of the LGBT community at the time of playing Big Brother, but came out long after their time on the show. With that in mind, you can look at their time on the show to see certain signals that were apparent on the show, or there are certain dynamics, events, or behaviors that came up which was related to sexuality, but it was not actualized even by the houseguest at that time. Parker came into the season and he was immediately targeted by Jacob and a few of the others of being a quote-unquote troublemaker. This is where intersectionality comes in, since he was the only black man in the house, and they called him a troublemaker, despite him being in power and despite him not doing anything wrong at this time. When I talked about black man in Big Brother, I believe I must have mentioned something along the lines of this. They kept on calling him messy, dramatic, and all that jazz, so I'm wondering if people were speculating about his sexuality even then. But on the show, we saw him and Amanda getting close, which pissed off her partner and Parker's own ally in Alex, as they were abetting showmance that was taking place. Parker, in real life and in recent years, identifies as gay, so I don't know if he was engaging in this potential showmance as a cover at the time to be closeted, or maybe he just didn't know that he was gay at the time. But either way, it's probably one of those two lenses, and either lens you look at, it's pretty interesting. And due to the twist of the season, which was based on romantic partners, Parker was cast as a straight man. But if he was actively closeted or on the down low, it could have added some of the stress that he faced during the short time he was in the game. And it also meant that he identified as straight to casting producers, since they set him up with a woman. And even that setup was very disgusting and foul, and how they used racial conflict to set them up. But I talked about that in his section regarding black men in Big Brother. In general, he had a lot of really great commentary regarding Big Brother and its issues with race and sexuality, and even his own experiences, but unfortunately his Twitter has been suspended or deleted, so all that footage, not footage, but all that archive and content I can't find to put in here, which is unfortunate. So the second of three gay people on Big Brother 9 is Joshuah from Big Brother 9. Unlike Parker, Joshuah was cast on the season as a gay man since he was openly gay. This is the second opportunity where two non-straight men were cast on a season of Big Brother. That ended up being four, but production did not know that at the time. And the fourth person isn't gay, so he's not going to be in this category. And due to the season being about romantic pairings, Joshua was obviously going to be paired up with a man, and that man was Neil. Most likely with the hopes of them getting together on the producer's end. Due to Neil leaving within the first week of the season, the romance or the dynamic between gay people in general, instead of just two non-straight people, was never really delved into. So it's another missed opportunity, just like it was in BB-8. Joshua was portrayed himself as a very messy, antagonistic, dramatic, sassy, and just a menace of a person overall throughout the season. It seemed like he was cast to replicate the mess that Evil Dick was in the prior season, but it was a worse look because he's a gay man and just continued with the stereotypical portrayal. And it's kind of like he used himself being gay as an excuse and a rationale for his judgment and almost kind of used it as a shield at times. I have no idea if he knew about James's sexuality on the season, but there's no further analysis or discussion of the dynamic between him and his bisexual friend. And of course, Parker did not last long enough to see how a bunch of these non straight men interact. There was definitely some homophobic tinted comments that he received, but in general, there was not a whole lot to discuss about him in this matter. Actually, I did remember one thing. Damn near all of his attacks and aggression and arguments and fights in the season were with women. As he threw a drink on Natalie, he called her all a bunch of names. He made fun of Amanda's father taking himself out, and then he really ripped on Allison's looks throughout the entire week, and he also called Amanda a horsey face, and I'm pretty sure he made fun of Natalie's looks as well. Joshua never put that energy out towards any of the men on the season. Matt got in his face and was daring him to do something, and Joshua was silent as a mouse. So this, to me, kind of shows a misogynistic element, where it's easy for him to lash out and go in on women, but he knows he can't do that to a man. And he feels like because he is gay, it's easy and almost justifiable for him to go at a woman. But the dynamic between that and him not having the same energy towards men, especially straight men, is definitely something I noticed with him, and it's a negative stereotype of gay men that he unfortunately exhibited during this season. So the third and final gay man on Big Brother 9 is Neil from Big Brother 9. So I have no comment on him in general. He was only there for a week, he was not on the feed since he was booted before the feeds came on, and he was edited out of the few episodes that he was there. But they clearly cast him with Joshua to either have the first gay showmance or to have a season that would have delved into gay interactions. And since these two were supposedly, or at least according to the producers, the only gay man of the season, his departure was definitely a mixed opportunity to show something that really isn't shown much at all on reality TV, especially since there's usually just one gay man or one non-straight man on a reality TV show or season. So now it is time to move on to Big Brother 10, where the gay man in that season is Steven. I don't think I have a whole lot to say about Steven during his journey on his season, though I might be surprised, because I say that and sometimes I end up having a decent amount to say afterwards. He was, of course, the only gay man on the season, and he was very open about being gay on the season, but he presented as a bit more masculine, as he was a cowboy and didn't have the sassy energy that people expected of gay people, and he was also pretty tall. I also wonder if, because he was not the most stereotypical gay person, if production was not the most pleased with him, hence his edit on the show. If I remember correctly, he claimed that Libra was homophobic, but I don't know if there was any actual proof of this, or if she was homophobic to him. But he was made into an outsider very quickly in the house. Some claim that it was because of Brian and associating with Brian, but I wonder if he felt like his sexuality was one of the reasons why he was being outcasted in the season, and not given much room to really do anything in the season. I will say that he didn't struggle regarding bonding with men on the season, as he was close to Dan and Brian. And there was a nice commentary where Dan mentions that he never met a gay person before meeting Steven, and they had that nice dynamic and depth to their interactions, while Steven was also able to be close to women like Angie and Keisha. While he did not like Jesse, it seemed like he had issues with people from both genders, though he didn't fit into what was stereotypical of gay men in this element, since many of them only bond with women on their seasons. He is also one of the few gay men on Big Brother who has gone on to be an actor in Korn, if you know what I mean. The next person is Kevin, who was on Big Brother 11 and 22. Out of all the gay men that appeared on Big Brother USA, he is the second and final person to be a returnee, and I think his case is different from Marcellas's, since it mainly came from a last minute mandate and desperation. His second season was greenlit in the midst of COVID, and it was safer to get returnees than to go through thousands of newbies in the auditioning process. So Marcellas would have remained the only returnee as I'm recording this had COVID not happened. And All Stars was really the first season that they heavily considered demographics a lot more. And Kevin, being a gay person and a Malaysian, meaning half black, half Asian person, made him an obvious casting choice. So that definitely played a part in it as well. And they found him to be more appealing than all the other gay men. And Marcellus clearly isn't coming back. Kevin definitely fit a lot of the similar tropes and check marks that gay men before him checked on the show. Very flamboyant and more feminine acting slash appearing, and smaller in appearance and size. He found it hard to bond with the men immediately, as he did not like the meathead Jesse being in the house, because he did not get with the muscular stuff, and he did not gel with Jeff and Braden in the house either, while Russell was the more open guy out of them all, but I wouldn't say that they were close. Kevin was essentially, quote unquote, one of the girls on both of his seasons, as he immediately bonded with Lydia and Chima, where it was Natalie later on in the season, where it was through them where he was able to progress throughout the game and have working relationships with some of the guys he had no relationships with, and also had a lot of strategic insight from those women. He felt dismissed by most of the guys and appreciated by most of the girls, which is something that he was struggling with throughout the season. I don't think people really realized how much internal baggage Kevin carried from Big Brother 11 and overall in real life until we saw him again on Big Brother 22. He talked very openly about how he felt demeaned by Jeff and felt like the latter was homophobic and represented the entitled straight white man that gets everything, which really rubbed Kevin the wrong way. We saw Kevin kind of repeat his journey on this season, where he mainly bonded with the women like Nicole A, and he recently went to her wedding, so it's cool that they're still close, Bailey and Devon throughout the season, and struggled with making relationships with the men on the season. Outside of David, though I believe that was more convenience with their interactions than anything else. It seemed like he saw Cody as Big Brother 22's Jeff, and it was why the relationship was so contentious throughout the season, as Kevin broke down the first time Cody nominated him, and they had a really bad argument during Kevin's last week in the house. He was left on the outs once again by the white straight aligned, and it clearly triggered something in Kevin, where a lot of the baggage that he had from his prior season and in his life really just planted him here as well. And he really struggled emotionally and mentally on Big Brother 22. I also forgot to mention that he was a part of the oddball clique in Big Brother 11. And obviously, while he did come off as a bit quirkier and nerdier, I wonder if they partially put him as a part of the outsiders because he was gay. Next on the list is Ragan from Big Brother 12. I think it was clear that they wanted Ragan to be the more obnoxious type of gay man, as he did come off as a bit more feminine, tiny, and quote unquote twinkish, which made him stand out a lot in a house that was obsessed with brocentricness and heavily muscular, masculine men throughout the season. Ragan was one of the men that did not fit in with this uber masculine image that a lot of the Big Brother 12 men portrayed, but he was not targeted in the beginning of the season. The man that he did get close to in the season was Matt, who was also of a smaller stature, and while he had decent enough relationships with Lane and Hayden, he really wasn't close to them, and struggled with the other hyper-masculine men like Brendan and Enzo, who he engaged in conflict with throughout the season. And of course, Ragan was never going to be invited in any of the all-male alliances happening. We saw him argue with Brendan several times throughout the season, and we saw Rachel throw homophobic comments at him in their infamous argument, where he was the quote-unquote sassy man that many gay house guests exhibit. Rachel mentioned that he sucked at being gay because he wasn't acting like the stereotypical gay person she likes, and asks if he's a bitch because he's gay. I also forgot that she said something very similar when they were both in the jury house and they argued there, and I didn't put that in the homophobia in Big Brother compilation on that video because I genuinely just forgot about it. So later on in the season, Ragan got a lot more isolated and frustrated, where it seemed like he was struggling a lot with the process of being alone and being on his way out of the house, and I am also assuming that it brought some flashbacks in his life. There was some homophobic comments made at the end game of the season where Ragan mentioned that it was Enzo who made it, while some fans stated that it was Lane, but maybe they had several incidents where it could have been both of them. While Big Brother 22 was getting ready to premiere and it was announced that Enzo would be a part of the cast, Reagan went into a huge rant and went into huge detail about the homophobia that he felt like Enzo exhibited and is going to be rewarded for it. He also talked about the homophobia of other Big Brother house guests who have been rewarded by consistent appearances on other CBS products and to have continued reality TV success. Heteronormative romances being able to profit while there not being a chance for a homonormative romance to form, and how only one gay man has ever been able to return, and that was Marcellas at the time. He went into more detail about how they use homophobic and stereotypical rhetoric regarding how they cast gay men on the show, and he gave a lot of good insight on it. So, Lawon from Big Brother 13 is next. I really do not have much to say about Lawon in this case. One of them is that he did not have a strong edit on the season, so most of his content in general is just going to be forgotten about. Another is that I don't think his homosexuality played much of a role in his journey throughout Big Brother 13. Lawon did fit the overtly flamboyant gay man archetype, who they definitely used for some obnoxious diary rooms, and dressed in very colorful clothing, and he was not notably masculine in comparison. What I will say about Lawon is that he didn't seem to struggle with making bonds with men, where he was close to Keith and Dominic throughout the season, and wasn't really seen as quote-unquote one of the girls either, despite being pretty flamboyant. Yeah, that's all I really got. So from Big Brother 14 is Will. Again, there's not a whole lot to say about Will in this section, and one of the reasons is that, like Lawon, he was given a pretty minimal edit on the show, so he was not given much to talk about. There was a moment in the first week of the season where Willie was talking game with the newbies about needing to not let the veterans play their games, and Will mentioned that he was tired of talking game and wasn't interested in it. After Will leaves the room, Willie makes fun of how Will spoke and how he said it, which is clearly homophobic, since Will has a more effeminate voice, and Willie decided to complain about what he said by using the tone of how Will spoke to mock him, so he was using it as a negative. Of course, this rubs Frank the wrong way, and he tells the entire house about it. Despite this moment, and definitely having some more flamboyant traits, I noticed that he was treated and seen as a bit more masculine than the other gay Big Brother house guests in comparison, where I think a lot of this has to do with him being very tall and not a twink, so he was seen as kind of athletic, and he was seen as threatening due to that, which isn't really the case for a lot of gay men in Big Brother. While he's not very muscular, he was seen as more muscular compared to the stereotypical gay man on Big Brother, but you could also say that he suffered and had a minimal edit because he wasn't as obnoxious as how Big Brother probably wanted him to be. And now it is time to talk about Andy from Big Brother 15. He tends to continue the trend of the under-edited gay man who, while having some flamboyant qualities, isn't obnoxious or overtly flamboyant and boisterous to the point where they could use it for quote-unquote entertainment purposes, which is how the first half of his season was like on the episodes. Andy was not masculine at all, but I don't know if I would say he was really feminine at all either. But the flamboyancy was there, and I think him being skinnier and smaller might have caused him to lean towards that other side in production's eyes. And also, I noticed production made him wear very colorful clothing. And as you all know, while the Haskins do bring some of their own clothing, production chooses what clothing of theirs that they bring into the house. And if they have clothing that is either missing or they want the house guests to dress a certain way, production will buy clothes for house guests to wear. So they intentionally wanted Andy to look as colorful as possible. And I've already mentioned a few of the other gay house guests before him had very colorful clothing. But because Andy was a superfan who was focusing more on the under the radar gameplay, they did not want to cover him. Though they ended up having to cover him once he started winning power and there was a lot less people in the house. Of course, there was a whole lot of homophobic commentary that took place on the live feeds, and they kind of used it as a way to address and bond with Andy, or at least that's what they claim. But some of the comments were definitely used towards a negative. I remember when my first video on homophobia on Big Brother was posted on Reddit, and he made a bunch of comments under that post, and he was justifying the comments, so it shows how some gay people don't think these comments are bad, or if they do, they internalize it and don't draw attention to it. I don't even recall Big Brother ever even addressing, much less celebrating the fact that he's the first LGBT winner ever of Big Brother history, and he's the first gay man to ever win Big Brother. But I honestly think just due to the scandals and the racism and the nastiness of the season, they really just wanted to put the season to bed and they didn't want anything celebratory about the season. And I think the fact that what should have been a huge milestone was kind of just put to bed due to all the nastiness in the season is a shame for sure. And you could argue that's another conversation that needs to be had. Frankie from BB16 is next. I find Frankie to be a very interesting person in this discussion because, in a lot of ways, he is the most stereotypically gay person to ever be on Big Brother. He is very scrawny, talks in a very effeminate voice, dyed his hair in a color that doesn't come up in the four natural hair colors, wears a bunch of makeup, and tends to wear glitter at times. Frankie also has, or had at the time of the season, a Broadway career and was a social media influencer at this point in his life, so it wasn't like he wasn't known, and he's very open about being a gay person. But despite having all these quote unquote stereotypical characteristics, Frankie also was not like how people expected him to be. One of the main things that stands out to me is that he was not a girl's guy or one of the girls, quote unquote. And I think that's why people like Victoria were so disappointed when he nominated her in the first week, since she expected him to be one of the girls, and why a lot of the girls kind of ended up being disappointed with him by the time the season ended. When you really look into it, he wasn't close with many of the women in the season at all, and the few that he could have been really close to, like Christine mainly, he never saw much worth in her, or them in general. All of his closest friends and allies were men, as he was close to Caleb and Devin in the beginning of the season, and he had this very interesting relationship with Zach. And there's a lot of discussions about the perceptions of male friendships, a gay man getting involved with a closeted bisexual man, or someone who isn't sure of their sexuality yet, which we'll definitely delve more into when Zach comes up, and saw himself as being closest to Derek and Cody throughout the season. He made a lot of problematic comments on the season, and one of them was about how gay men don't choose to be gay, while lesbian women choose to be lesbians, which is so problematic. And it shows the misogyny with gay men, and also some of the disconnect between gay men and lesbian women. So even two people who are homosexual, their genders will differentiate them, but this is the point of intersectionality that I mentioned earlier. Even how he talked about and treated some of the women throughout the season showed this, especially as he was in damn near was always around men, and he said the worst comments about the woman, but almost felt like because he was gay, it was justified. And apparently there were moments where he was kind of a bit too touchy and forward with some of the men, which made them uncomfortable, but he kind of felt like he was justified because he was a gay man and would use that to almost like portrayed that he was less, not less masculine, but less intimidating. So him doing that little touch shouldn't be that bad. I do think Frankie is a very proud gay man, but how he acted in the season still showed approval from straight men and masculinity, where they are not susceptible to some of the problems regarding that. And now it is time to talk about Jason from BB17 and BBOTT, though I usually don't talk about over the top. Jason fits the line of the quote unquote stereotypical gay men that Big Brother has consistently cast. Jason is definitely quote unquote one of the girls type of gay man. He is extremely effeminate in the way he speaks, expresses himself, and moves around, while his clothing was also very colorful and contributed to this as well. He immediately bonded with Devon, Meg, and a few of the other women throughout the season, where he gossiped with them and wanted to uplift a lot of them throughout the season. Though he did have allegiances with men, they were definitely less close than his relationships with the women. They definitely used Jason quite a bit in the diary room for a sassy, witty diary room, and he was seen as one of the bigger personalities of the seasons. At the same time, we did see the cattiness that is often associated with a lot of gay men, more on over the top than BB17, though it was there too, where because he is gay, it is seen as more acceptable for him to be rude and vile towards women. Especially with his commentary about Shelby in particular, though he was like that with some of the other ball smashers as well. What was interesting is that production made it very clear, or the network, I should say, that they were very disappointed with the way that BB17 was going down, as Les Moonves mentioned that the earlier boots were more interesting than the latter boots, and it was clear that Jason was one of the people booted that he was referring to. It has been discussed thoroughly by the fandom that the jurors of BB17 were harder to stereotype and archetype and give interesting diary rooms, which is where Jason fit in, since he was very easy to place in a simple, profitable archetype and stereotype. And the next person is Jozea from BB18. I find Jozea to be so interesting regarding this conversation and so refreshing as a casting choice. I remember that he mentioned in his preseason interviews that he doesn't use labels, though I'm pretty sure that he identifies now as gay. Jose is someone that has some of the stereotypical gay traits with being very sassy, flamboyant, and vocal about his opinions. At the same time, I do think he exhibited a lot of quote-unquote stereotypically masculine traits as well. Jose immediately took the leadership position for the newbies and has no shyness or timidness whatsoever. I'm looking at a list of the men that I have discussed up to this point, and all of them are skinnier and are borderline scrawny. But Jozea is really the first really muscular gay man to be a part of Big Brother, and he was not afraid to show it off or show off his body at all. It shows that gay men have different physical appearances regarding their bodies, and just because some of them are physically imposing doesn't make them any less gay. I did discuss in my BB18 review there was definitely something to his interactions with Polly that I always found to be oddly intense, and neither one of them liked one another, talked a lot of crap about one another, and got into arguments with one another, and I never got Polly's aggressive hostility towards them. Watching their development on the challenge, and even years later, I'm wondering if there are some potential repressed attraction that caused some of these very weird interactions. And while Jose had close relationships with some of the women on the season, he had no issue bonding with the men, and his closest friendships/allegiances were with Victor and Paul, so he didn't come off as quote-unquote one of the girls, despite being close to some of the women as well. And I'm wondering if that potentially has to do with some of his quote-unquote stereotypical masculine traits, if that makes sense. Next we have Ramses from Big Brother 19. I don't have much to say about him in the season, and like a few of the others, there just isn't much to say about him in general, since he didn't do much at all. Ramses is a thinner guy who might fit the aesthetic of a quote-unquote twink, and while he has a softer, arguably more feminine voice as well, this can be seen as him fitting in the stereotypical gay person cast in Big Brother regarding the archetype. But Ramses wasn't really flamboyant or loudly flamboyant in the way that the producers probably would have liked, hence him not getting much of an edit on the episodes. Though that also is due to him just not doing much in general. With a lot of the muscular bros getting along throughout the season, or at least until Paul told them not to, and Paul never really letting Ramses into Paul's cult, essentially, Ramses was on the outs for his entire time on the season. Ramses continues the trend of gay men being very close to the women on their season, as he was friends with Meg, Jillian, and Alex, or at least until Alex ditched him, and he was getting close to Elena before he left, so there was that continuum of potentially being seen as quote-unquote one of the girls. In general, he didn't offer much, but here is just a little bit that I thought of. But I remember some people finding it very suspicious that Corey refused to see how valuable Ramses was to himself and Jessica's games, especially with the whole veto situation. Next on the list is JC from Big Brother 20. What I will say about JC is that I believe him being a shorter person played a bigger part regarding his experience on the show, or at least his identity on the show, than his homosexuality. I do feel like because of his identities, JC felt like he could do anything he wanted to do, and I also feel like because he is gay and a shorter person, he wanted to prove his masculinity. So, he in general is very fit in his everyday life, and he also focused a lot of his time and attention on getting close to the guys. He was obviously close to Fessel, though he was using Fessel for gameplay purposes, and because Fessel was the largest guy in the house, I do think that played a part in their dynamics. JC did get closer to Brett when the season came closer to ending. Of course, there are his interactions with Tyler, where he pretty much gave up his game to do whatever Tyler wanted, only to realize that Tyler was never reciprocating it and was never going to reciprocate it, but it was too late. There were several moments in the season where he was flirting and physically groping Tyler, and arguably some other guys too, but Tyler claimed that he wasn't uncomfortable with it, but he most likely downplayed it when the producers asked him about it, and didn't want to make it seem like a big deal. I remember there was a huge push online to get JC expelled for this, and of course that didn't happen. And I personally believe that it didn't happen because one, they have a schedule that they need to follow, and people need to be evicted at a certain period of time so they can fit the schedule. And two, I do think it is another example of how a gay person and or a shorter person can get away with certain acts because of their identities that are often marginalized. JC also got into some very tense arguments with Bailey and made several inflammatory comments before and after the season where he uses himself being gay as a defense mechanism for not being bigoted. And because he is gay, he feels like he can touch men however he feels like it, which just sets a really bad precedent. JC was never considered one of the girls, and honestly, he didn't really seem to like most, if any, of the women on this season. So I think he was trying so hard to grasp onto anything relating to masculinity, and obviously women aren't that, and how he was with Angela and KC, especially during the end of the season, was kind of weird to me. So if anything, I think he was kind of struggling with his masculinity, and he shows many symptoms of toxic masculinity, but that could partially due to his homosexuality, also his height, or a combination of both. Now it is time to talk about Tommy from Big Brother 21. I feel like he is somewhat similar to JC in the fact that they are both shorter, more muscular men, but don't come off as the most macho, but he also reminds me of Frankie, is that they are both Broadway men who are flamboyant, but doesn't really come off as feminine either. Despite having a lot of muscle, he was not seen as a competitive threat in the same way the Jags were, though I think his height caused him to be seen as unthreatening as well, or was a big factor regarding that. What I noticed about Tommy is that while he did get along with the woman in the season, he wasn't seen as quote unquote one of the girls, and I think it's because he in general is just a very social person. While he was close to women like Holly, Christy, and Annalise, he was also very close to Jackson, Nick, and Jack throughout the season too, and had a lot of strong bonds with the men. He got a decent amount of screen time, though production definitely had up his Broadway hamminess in the diary room. I did notice that he was touchy with some of the other guys like Nick, but it was actually accepted and reciprocal since Nick touched him back. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about him. And now we are moving on to Derek from Big Brother 23. Now that I am thinking about it, I really do not think Derek's homosexuality played much of a factor at all in his season or his experience on the season. I think one of the reasons for this is due to the fact that race had such a strong impact on the season and everyone's experiences on it, while it kind of overshadowed their other identities, and this regards to people in and out of the cookout. Derek had a weird crush on Frenchie that was thankfully cut short, and he did kind of spend a lot of his time with Azza and Brittany, and he was kind of just left alone for a while. He was very flamboyant, and I think his flamboyance caused people to see him as less threatening, as well as his weight, so he wasn't targeted and not seen as a threat at all. I also think his flamboyance gave him extra leeway to trash talk a lot of the women, and this is unfortunately the trend for a lot of gay men in general, as they use it as a rationale to be misogynistic and use their quote unquote gayness, it's not quote unquote gayness, sorry, their gayness to get rid of their masculinity and embrace their femininity. So it is a joke, and I've talked about this with a decent amount of the gay men on Big Brother that I've already discussed. He made a lot of horrible comments about Whitney's body and the way she dresses, and he called Tiffany all types of B words and other words of profanity. Of course, this led to his feud with Tiffany throughout the season, and he definitely encouraged some of the misogyny that was taking place in the end game weeks. And even his treatment of Asa during the last 2 weeks was bordering on misogyny or had misogynistic undertones, where he credited himself for her making it far and pretty much for everything that she did in the game, which not only was inaccurate but too is very minimizing as well. And he wanted to get closer with the guys instead of the women on the cookout, so he definitely had that element to him there. So the second to last person on this list is Michael from Big Brother 24. I found him to be pretty interesting regarding his sexuality on the season, as he's what people would describe as a quote unquote twink, based on his very scrawny build, but he's arguably the biggest competition beast in Big Brother history. He won mental, physical, and endurance competitions, as well as luck competitions, showing that he is diverse in the type of competitions that he wins, and he made his prowess known from the very beginning to the very end of his journey on the season. There was a lot of worry that he would win out, and you can definitely tell it bothered people like Monty, who's a lot stronger physically than Michael, as the latter expected that he would win all the competitions and was losing to the scrawny Michael. One thing I did notice about Michael is that he struggled to make connections and bonds with the guys on the season, and I think it's because he put a lot of misconceived perceptions about them on them. He thought that because they were brawny and muscular, that he never had much in common with them, and never put in much effort with any of them, with the exception of Kyle, who clearly had his own motivations. I think a lot of it came from his insecurities, and it shined even more once the leftovers were formed, and he was aligned with the more muscular guys. Most of his interactions throughout the season were with Brittany and Taylor, and it came to me like it was easier for him to bond with women than men. I know people claimed that the Pound alliance being formed without him could have been lent in homophobia, but apparently Michael just went to bed early that night, and Kyle really did want to include him in the alliance, but he just wasn't around. So, yeah. And the final person I'm going to be discussing on this list is Hisam from Big Brother 25. What is very noticeable about Hisam is that he is very muscular and tall, so he came off as a lot more masculine in comparison, which was made even more apparent when he started dominating all the early competitions that he was partaking in the house. He was seen as the threat in the house, and he in general had a very imposing, direct personality that rubbed people the wrong way. Though I do think it partially rubbed people the wrong way, also due to his appearance. In a certain lens, he was one of the most masculine gay men on the show. Despite all of that, he still had some commonalities that the other gay men prior to him have on the show, mainly with building strong bonds with the women on the season and also struggling to bond with any of the men at all. I think it must have been due to some events in his past, but we never saw him get to know the men on the season. So there was some disconnect there and feeling more comfortable around women, even though he was arguably just as fit and even more fit than many of the straight bro muscly dudes on the house. Or in the house, my bad. And then there was the unfortunate element of him where he kept on calling some of the women B words and other profanity, and it coming off like him feeling like it is okay because he is gay. So it would almost like cancel out some of the misogyny that he displayed. So that's the unfortunate element with him. Okay, so first off, I cannot believe that this is almost an hour long at this point in the video, where I really wasn't expecting it to be this long, but I guess I just had a lot of commentary to say, and I had a lot to break down. So as you all know, I tend to break down people on Big Brother based off of three categories: pre-jury, jury, and endgame, and I rearranged the gay contestants on the show based on those three categories. Obviously, for people who returned, I gave them each a different category for a different season, and here is what I got. So for the endgamers, which is from the final 6 onwards, 11 out of 25 of them made it to the endgame, so that's about 44% of them. 4 out of 25% of them made it to the jury, and by jury, I usually mean either on seasons that starts jury at the final 9, it's from 9th to 7th place, and from juries that start with 11 people, it goes from 11th to 7th place. So it's from the first juror to 7th place. 4 out of 25 of the men were jurors, and this is 0.16%. And for the final category, 10 out of 25 of them went to the pre-jury, or they were pre-jurors, and that is 40% of them. So it's a pretty even split between the gay contestants either going pre-jury or being endgamers, which I found very interesting. And this usually means that they either do really well or really poorly on Big Brother. To focus on the pre-jurors, it's clear that many of them struggled with fitting in on their season due to a variety of reasons, though their sexuality might have been one of those reasons. And though I don't think they were booted because of their sexuality, I think the hang-ups of their sexuality, where it's either them bonding with outsiders, only getting close to the women, or not being able to get close to the men, caused them to be on the outs of whatever structures were on their seasons, and they were not able to overcome that. And by looking at the order of the pre-jurors, I noticed one was from BB8, one was from BB9. Technically, two were from BB9, but one of them left the game, and another one was from BB10. So from the string of BB8 to BB10, most of them were gone in the pre-jury. And then I noticed there was one who went pre-jury on 13 and another one on 14. So that's another kind of string. And then there's a decent string from Big Brother 17 to Big Brother 19, where all of them were booted in the pre-jury. And Hisam is the final one who was booted pre-jury, but we don't know if this will be a trend or not. Based on how Big Brother 26 will go, we'll find out then. And then with the jurors, so this is people from 9th to 7th or 11th to 7th, depending on the season. With the 4 of them, I noticed that The ones who were able to make it to this jury portion of the season were in general early jurors. Marcellas from All Stars was the first juror, and he barely made it to jury on the season since he had a huge target on him during his last 3 weeks. Joshua was the third juror, if I remember correctly, so he didn't last the longest either, but you could consider that to be the mid juror. Actually, no, because that was on a 9-person jury. He would have been the final boots before becoming an endgamer, so I guess that's okay. Will from BB5 was the first juror, just like Marcellas from BB7 was, so there's that. And Kevin from All Stars was the third juror, so he still went kind of early jury as well. Just from looking at these four, Joshua and Will were the only ones who had solid alliances on their seasons, where Marcellas and Kevin were just permanently on the out, and then they went when their time went. And even out of the two who had solid alliances, Joshua's alliance quickly went into the minority, and Will was infiltrated very well, but he had that weird week with Adria in power, and that's how he ended up going here. And then now it is time to talk about the end gamers, and the first two game men on Big Brother actually went to the end game where they both ranked 5th, and I'm obviously referring to Bunky and Marcellas from BB3, but they had smaller casts where they each only had 12 people. But Marcellas in BB3 was on the outs at first, and then he had to integrate himself well. And Bunky pretty much had to kiss up to the power, and he was in a decent position at first with the top alliance. That ended up falling, and he was running on fumes at that point. Beau in BB6 was an endgamer, as he was in the dominant friendship alliance, and he went because he was seen as more threatening than Yvette. There was a long string of people who did not make it to the endgame, where the final person, or the next person after Beau, was Kevin from BB11, where he made it all the way to 3rd place and had a chance of winning. Though I think the coup helped him a lot, but he had to fight from the underdog position after a lot of his allies went home at mid-season. And then Ragan was the next endgamer, and he made it to 5th place, where he really wasn't in any real alliances, though he was close to Matt and he had decent enough relationships. I think he laid under the radar intentionally, and that caused him to make it to the end. But he was one of the final non-brigade people, so his time came. So the next person who became an endgamer after that was Andy from Big Brother 15, where he obviously won, and I think he played the game Ragan wanted to play, with being under the radar, but Andy had a lot of alliances, and he was able to maneuver very well and control a lot of the information. The person right after Andy is Frankie from BB16, and he made it to 5th. And he only got 5th due to the rewind week, where he would have been in the final 4, and he would have had a very good chance of winning had he made it to the end. And he, of course, was in the dominant Detonators alliance throughout the entire season, and got himself out of some tough gems. So there's a string of people who are pre-jurors before we get to our next endgamer in JC, and after this point, we have a long string of endgamers, and of course JC is the first one, where he was an affiliate of the Level 6 Alliance, though he was never really able to fully break into that alliance to have full control, because he was following under Tyler, though he did have a good chance of winning had he made it to the end. The next person after this is Tommy from BB21, who, in my opinion, somewhat played a similar game to Andy and Ragan, or a mesh of them, where he was very under the radar, and he was in the alliances, but I don't think he was very active, and the only thing he tried to do was keep his alliance together, even when it was clear that they were fumbling. But he had some fight in his final week, he was a huge jury threat, and he was very strong socially. So I already talked about Kevin earlier, so not including him in 22 in this. We have Derek Fraser, who is the next newbie game man, and he made it to the final 2 due to the Cookout Alliance. And yeah. And the final endgamer is Michael from BB24, where he won a bunch of competitions throughout the season, and he was in the dominant Leftovers Alliance that carried him into the jury portion pretty easily, and even though he played a huge part in blowing it up, he won a few more competitions, but he just really couldn't stop himself from winning out, and once he couldn't win out, he was booted. So, yeah. Alrighty, so that concludes my coverage for this video, and it was very interesting looking into all of these men and their journeys in Big Brother, and you kind of see how a lot of things changed over the 2.5 decades and how a lot of things haven't changed. So I'm definitely planning on doing this with lesbian women, bisexual men. I don't think there are enough transgender or non-binary people in US, so I'm most likely going to have to combine that into one video with the transgender or non-binary people from Canada as well. And obviously I'm going to make the video on gay men in Big Brother Canada, gay women in Big Brother Canada, bisexual men and women in Big Brother Canada, so I don't know how many bisexual people there are in Canada, so on and so forth. So yet again, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!